The new year hasn't just started, it has exploded. While the world was recovering from the holidays, the US military was carrying out Operation Absolute Resolve, capturing Nicolas Maduro and asserting control over Venezuelan oil. The markets are reeling as geopolitical risk is repriced in real time. Defense stocks are surging to all-time highs. Oil is in a state of shock, and the Supreme Court has punted on opining on the legality of Trump's tariffs. We are in a new era of security-first economics, where the Monroe Doctrine, now the Donroe Doctrine, is being forced with silicon and steel and maybe a few other things. Welcome to Wall Street Truthbombs Weekly Wrap. Let's look back at the key themes that impacted the market and your portfolios in the week that just passed. The first full trading week of 2026 will go down in the history books. On January 3rd, the U.S. carried out a surprise military strike in Caracas, apprehending Maduro and setting off a geopolitical firestorm. The markets opened the week in a frenzy, with defense contractors rocketing as President Trump proposed a massive $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget with some strings attached. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has punted on opining on the legitimacy of the Trump tariffs. Let's get into the themes. Theme one, we're going to call this one the Venezuela Liberation Jolt. This one is the capture of Maduro, which has completely reset Latin America risk premia. Venezuelan bonds spiked from 33 cents to 42 cents on the dollar. You might remember that those same zombie bonds were trading at 19 cents on the dollar just a year ago. They're zombie bonds, which means they still exist. However, the Venezuelan government is not paying not only they're not paying the coupons, but there is no chance at this point, at least that we know of repaying the principal as well. Meanwhile, the U.S. oil majors are all lobbying and lining up to see who's going to be able to get their boots on the ground for re-entry into the Orinoco Belt. As you guys probably know, Venezuela sits on top of the largest oil reserve in the world, even more. And we talked about that here on Wall Street Truthbombs, even more than what's underneath of Saudi Arabia. But it's a different type of crude oil that's underneath Venezuela. This is sour heavy crude, and not everybody knows how to refine that. The good news is U.S. refiners in the Gulf, on the Gulf Coast, happen to be really good at that because they've been doing it for years with the heavy crude that comes from Canada. So you better believe that this is going to have a major impact and probably a very positive one in the long run. We're going to be hearing a lot more about that in the days and weeks to come. Your truth bomb on that theme is this. This isn't just regime change. It's asset seizure. The U.S. is reasserting the Monroe Doctrine, now called the Donroe Doctrine, and they're telling the world that Western Hemisphere energy is now under American lock and key. Expect a multi-year reconstruction boom that benefits U.S. industrial giants. And friends, there are bigger implications as well, which we are starting to think about, and we're starting to watch the risk of other countries in the region, wondering who's next with this Monroe Doctrine that covers the entire Western Hemisphere. Believe me, we are considering all this stuff. You may recall earlier in the week going around the internet were these great videos of Maduro screaming, "Come and get me. Don't take your time. Come and get me, you coward." Well, apparently Trump didn't take his time, and apparently he went and got him. Anyway, we're going to hear a lot more about this theme in weeks and even days to come. This one is very live right now, my friends. That is one big theme right there, and there are lots of implications that go well beyond the energy sector, into the defense sector, and even beyond. So we're going to be talking a lot about that here at Truth Bombs in the days and weeks ahead. Let's go to theme number two, the $1.5 trillion war chest. President Trump proposed raising military spending by 67% to $1.5 trillion for 2027, citing troubled and dangerous times. Defense stocks are the new tech stocks, and you could probably read about that because I've been quoted a lot about that in the press in this past week. Lockheed and Northrop are hitting records. The market is pricing in a permanent state of military readiness. Folks, if you go to the Wall Street Truth Bombs homepage, you will see that we have videos on this. I put out a video on this very topic early on in the week. This was before President Trump came out and announced his $1.5 trillion budget. We talked about on Wall Street Truth Bombs the importance of defense in order to enforce this new Monroe/Donroe doctrine. And we saw defense stocks going all over the place this week. It was a very news-heavy week on the defense sector, but I can assure you that investors in the defense sector are realigning themselves and rethinking the possibilities, looking at defense stocks, which were once thought of as stable, cyclical stocks, are now being looked at as growth stocks. Well, we're going to be hearing, just like energy, we're going to be hearing a lot about the defense sector going forward. And that is really very interesting because you investors out there, and I know you're out there, you investors, just like us at Wall Street Truth Bombs, are always looking for growth opportunities outside of technology. Well, there happens to be a lot of technology in the defense sector, and that has historically been bogged down by that big contractor complex that they all work in. But now we're finding more nimble companies. Not only the big contractors are getting more nimble, but there are a lot of smaller upstarts that are going to have major impacts on this new hemispherical dominance that we talked about this week. It is getting very real, my friends. So we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to that. Go and check out our video on that. It's right on our homepage. Go ahead. I would wait, but I don't have that much time. Let's get on to the truth bomb. The peace dividend is officially dead. We are transitioning to a war economy where the Pentagon is the primary engine of GDP growth. If you aren't invested in defense, you are betting against the only sector with guaranteed revenue growth. Boom, hear that one. That is amazing. We're talking about the defense sector. Always a sleepy sector, but no more, my friends. We have a Department of War, and now we have a sector of war. So we will be talking a lot about this theme going forward. Okay, theme number 3 is the SCOTUS silence. The Supreme Court was supposed to release an opinion today on whether or not President Trump's tariffs are legal or not. This has been a quiet one, and folks have not been focusing on that because of all the craziness that's going on, although it was there in the background, and we talked about it here at Wall Street Truth Bombs. We knew that there are big implications if the Supreme Court actually considers Trump's tariffs to be illegal. Now, if you look at all of the betting sites, you would see that the odds are that at least the bettors are thinking that the Supreme Court is going to consider the tariffs to be illegal. But I will also tell you at Wall Street Truth Bombs, our sources, my colleagues on the street, we're talking a lot about it off the record. And a lot of us are believing that, in fact, there was a good chance that the Supreme Court does consider those tariffs to be illegal. And if they are considered illegal, that could have many implications. Clearly, tariffs going away has a positive implication on all the companies that are paying them because that means more profitability. However, that also means that the government is not now collecting what they've already collected, $200 billion last year in tariff income. It's a tax, right? So if suddenly the federal government is not able to collect that 200 plus billion in this year, well, guess what? The government's budget, AKA the deficit, is going to rise. And if the deficit rises, you can expect bond yields to go up. And that is not good if you're holding the bonds or if you are holding growth stocks, right? Because growth stocks have proven to be very sensitive to longer maturity treasury yields. And this certainly will have an impact. Meanwhile, the theme of this week was focused certainly on that. But what ultimately happened was the Supreme Court on Friday decided to punt and not opine on it despite what everyone was expected. And basically, that just means we're going to move it over here at the Wall Street Truth Bombs Weekly Wrap from what happened last week to what might happen next week. So the next time we might be able to hear from the Supreme Court on this matter will be Monday. But that was a big theme that impacted this week, the fear of what might happen and what the impact might be. And it turned out to be a big nothing burger, meaning there was absolutely no resolution. So we're going to have to wait. And one thing the market hates more than bad news, it's no news or having to wait and not knowing what's up. And that is exactly how the market closed out the week, though it closed out the week in a very positive way. Folks, if you like this type of content, please click like and subscribe. We drop bombs here every single day. You don't have to wait for the weekend to hear what happened last week. Come to the site every day and come often because we drop lots of videos, not only educating you on what to watch, but how to translate those things that are coming out, economic releases, things that are happening in the market, how they impact your portfolio, and how to act on those things, as well as our bomb blasts, where we talk all about what's happening in real time. You would have seen us last week on Saturday morning, because in the middle of the night, Truth Bomb Central was focused on what was going on in Venezuela, jumping up early on Saturday morning so I can get a video out to you first and let you know what was going on the ground and how that was going to impact your portfolio. I was so excited to get that news to you right here in my echo chamber office that I forgot to put my microphone in front of my mouth. But the fact of the matter is we got the information out, and I'm glad you all saw it, and I hope it helped you out this week. Anyway, come back and come back often. But if you click like and subscribe and click notifications, you will get notifications when we drop new videos, which means you're going to hear from us an awful lot. Okay, let's move on to theme number 4, energy control versus supply. Despite the invasion, oil prices have actually remained muted due to a massive global supply glut. WTI is hovering around $58 as traders realize Venezuela's infrastructure is trashed. Shale producers fear a future flood of Venezuelan crude oil could crash prices. Now, we talked about this over here at Wall Street Truth Bombs all week. Check out the videos. But if you didn't check out the videos, I will tell you that in the long term, yes, indeed, there's going to be a lot of more or extra supply of crude oil. I just said it before, Venezuela is on top of 20% of the global crude oil supply. They just don't pull a lot of it out of the ground. They have a very an aging infrastructure and not a very efficient infrastructure. They only pump roughly about 1 million barrels per day, which is very, very small, a very, very small amount of global daily production. However, now that the U.S. is taking control of their oil and you have all the majors lining up to possibly fix that infrastructure, we can expect in the long run that there's going to be a lot more supply. Going back to basic economics, more supply pushes prices down. Now, if you look across the energy sector, it doesn't affect the entire energy sector the same. Okay, the refiners who buy crude oil and turn it into useful products like tar, like motor oil, like lubricant oil, like plastic, like all sorts of things that crude oil goes into. Oh, gasoline, fuel oil. I mean, all that kind of stuff. Those folks are going to be able to possibly buy crude oil at cheaper prices in the future. That means bigger profits. Okay, for a time. Not forever, right? Because crude oil and the price of those distillates also move in a market, right? So oversupply there will also put pressure on prices, but it gives them a lot more room, a lot more headroom, right? So if you look at crude oil and you look at the costs to pull crude oil, lifting costs to bring it out of the ground, you will see that U.S. shale is pretty expensive, the traditional way that the U.S. drills oil. In fact, it's the cheapest if you look over to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. That's why they have so much flexibility in terms of what they can charge and still make a profit. But over here in the US, it's not as cheap to pull out of the ground. In Canada, where they also drill for heavy crude, but a slightly different one than what we would get from Venezuela, that is also very expensive. So, but in Venezuela, it is possibly the cheapest lifting cost around, at least certainly in this hemisphere. So that gives producers ultimately a lot of flexibility. And long run, that should be slightly positive. But what it really means in the long run for all of us, consumers, you and me, and the things that we consume like gasoline, oil, and all that other kind of stuff, that means more stability, right? Because we're less at the mercy of the larger global markets. Look, we still don't set the prices. Prices are set globally. However, if the U.S., which is now the largest producer, becomes with its allies yet a larger producer, that can only mean one thing, and that's stabilization. And stability is good. Now, I alluded to this earlier, but I went off on a little bit of a tangent. You saw crude oil go up a little bit this week. You might be questioning, why is that? Well, that is because of all the volatility and not knowing what's going to go on in the near future, right? So supply can be impacted. In fact, you may recall earlier this week, we talked about it here, that there was a quarantine on Venezuelan oil. President Trump said, stop, do not ship any more oil. So right there and then, 1 million barrels of heavy crude was now taken out of the daily supply, leaving Canada as the sole supplier, or the major supplier, of heavy crude. And that was good for Canada this week. Crude oil prices went up just a little bit, but long-term prices are going to stabilize and ultimately possibly go down. But there are so many very interesting implications on this. I would suggest that you click on the Wall Street Truthbombs homepage, watch some of our videos on that. We got a lot out there. Your truth bomb on this is as follows. The invasion wasn't about lowering prices. It was about controlling supply for tomorrow. The oil bonanza will take years to manifest, meaning the real energy play is the oil services firm who have to rebuild the Venezuelan wells from scratch. All right, pay attention to that. The services firm, right? The services firms are companies like Halliburton and Schlumberger. Those companies, those are the service firms, right? Somebody's got to rebuild all those pipelines and all the reservoirs, and they got to do all that kind of stuff because it's pretty much rusted out from years of neglect and also lots of political strife that has been going on over there. Imagine the opportunities if we can maintain stability, not only in the country from a political standpoint, but in their business infrastructure. Wow. Great potential opportunity in the future. Markets viewed it as I think, a very positive. The sentiment was very positive around this, even though it's very complicated. And of course, there are lots of risks that are now in the market, but that was viewed as a net positive. Now, let's get to our final theme. And we call that one the Great Decoupling. U.S. markets hit new highs, while European and Asian markets, they faltered under the weight of geopolitical uncertainty. S&P 500 hit new records, while the Nikkei and Euro stocks slumped. Capital is fleeing global markets for the safe haven of the U.S. industrial base. Wow. Your truth bomb on that one is American exceptionalism is back, and it's back on steroids. The world is fragmenting, and investors are voting with their feet. They want to be inside the American fortress, not stuck in the global commons. Wow. Think about that for a second, right? We talked a lot about American exceptionalism, and of course that faded earlier in the year. There are lots of challenges, certainly in words, on the American exceptionalism, but the administration proved last weekend that America can still do things that are very, very interesting. And if we can pull this one off, and we can pull this off in let's call it without turning it into a bigger global conflict. If we can manage it, it could be a very, very positive thing, not just for the U.S., but for the hemisphere. And think about all the benefits for not only American firms, but also, and dare we say for the Venezuelan firms that were also under the thumb of a dictatorship and being controlled by guerrilla groups. where even good business ideas were struggling to get off the ground, and all that potential resource being wasted because of the political unrest. If we can maintain that political stability, it is a great opportunity. And that is, my friends, an extension of American exceptionalism. If you like this kind of content, my friends, please click like and subscribe. Again, we do this all the time. We have the finer points on this. We dig deep into all of these themes, and we try to help you reduce these themes into investing opportunities. Folks, this was the week where geopolitics took the steering wheel, and they never let go. The Venezuelan invasion has changed the map right under our feet. The defense budget has completely changed the math. Supreme Court left the door wide open on tariffs. We're going to be talking a lot more about that in the week to come. The smart money isn't looking at earnings just yet, but they're coming. They're looking at satellite images and Pentagon contracts. So you better buckle up, because the math is changing as we speak. And those were your key themes from the past week. Why don't you join us every day at Wall Street Truth Bombs, where I drop them here before the market figures them out.